Law, a series of podcasts focused on insights and learning pertaining to the implementation and use of AI in legal practice, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull Hull LLP, brought to you by Counsel.ai.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of A Better Place to Be, AI and the Law. Hi, Suzana.
Hi there, Ian. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. I'm great. Looking forward to our discussion and continuing dialogue on these important aspects of AI and how we're integrating it into our legal practice.
Absolutely, me as well.
So one of the things that sort of struck me today and was an illustration of why just the importance of AI in our practice. And I was on the phone with a client and sort of interesting engagement. So new lawsuit came in. We knew it was coming, but for clients, it's never easy to be sued. And so the first time they see it, and they were suggesting that they would put it into AI and their own ChatGPT to somehow sort of plain English it and to get a comfort on what was going on. And I sort of stopped and said, okay, well, wait a minute. First of all, that it's probably not a good idea for a bunch of reasons. One is, of course, if it's not an enterprise chat GPT you're using, then you're going to expose your lawsuit into the internet, number one. And you're also going to get some analysis that might help or hurt your case that someone might look at. And then I said, okay, why don't you leave that to me to do? And I will get you back a summary. Now, before we would have done that summary ourselves, but I was able to turn to my associate and say, look, that's the client expectation. They got sued today. They want to know today in plain English what's going on, not an 18-page report 2 weeks later. So I just thought it was a really interesting sort of use case to, stepping it up as lawyers to get engaged in AI, because at the client level, it's flat out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, clients are expecting it. It's just a reality. They're coming in, with the internet, they came in a lot more informed at our first consultations. Now with AI, they're coming in legally armed with, their understanding of the law or ChatGPT's version of it or what have you. And the real concern, of course, is that they need to be educated, that we have to be careful not to put our documents, our information out there, because, as lawyers, we lose the confidence and the protection of solicitor-client privilege. The client's matter is going to be out there, will undermine ultimately what they do or could do. And I think that's where, we really need to be forward thinking and informing our clients of the importance of trusting us and our systems rather than just, what's out there and what's free and what's at their fingertips.
And I think, as you've already done with our firm, as you've added a paragraph to our retainer agreement that expressly says, don't do this. And it was interesting. This was a relatively new client who just relatively recently signed the retainer agreement. So it was a good reminder that we've got to be vigilant in making sure that they understand what these open access tools are going to do to their potential lawsuits.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, before we get on to the next sort of our main topic today, it was interesting. I was been listening to tons of stuff out there and trying to continue to learn about change management, trying to come up with techniques. And I know you're the same. What resources are we listening to? Scott Galloway is now one that I'm listening to a lot more. He's got tremendous, and he's very famous, but he's got tremendous ideas. One of the things he talked about in a recent podcast was, he said, it's not about legacy. It's about honoring the responsibilities you choose in life and by doing the work that lies in front of you. Now, he was talking as he can do. He's such an amazing guy. He's got really profound thoughts, but that was more talking about sort of general behavior of us as humans. But I just thought it was such a great quote for AI and the use of AI. We've accepted the responsibility of being lawyers. All of us, and it doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in, we all have ethical obligations to stay current with technology. And so we've accepted the responsibility. And as he says, you choose in life, we accepted that. And by doing the work that lies right in front of you, and the work that lies right in front of you, in my view, is learning about AI. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then another one, really, this one didn't come from Scott Galloway, but it was another podcast I was listening to, was the speakers were talking about the dynamic in a law firm to keep in mind, and that is the balancing act between human capital and token capital. And it's such a great way to put it. I mean, we need to continue to balance our what we're doing with our lawyers and our staff and our teams around us against token capital, literally. And as we know, the AI tools are run by the use of tokens. And so I thought that was a really neat idea, because one of the things that we're now launching deep into is the new Claude products that have really, and we've been teasing this out, and we'll be talking more about it as it unfolds in terms of our use of it. But the new Claude products, which allow for really Claude is able to draw on our existing AI tools. We're in co-counsel, so it can help manage the access to the information in co-counsel, co-pilot, and help with drafting and so on. And we're going to get into a more sophisticated talk about Claude as we go along. But what struck me was what we've learned is, of course, we have to, with these tools, be very careful that we are not overspending our tokens. Claude, the model with Claude, of course, allows for pay per usage. And so, this idea of taking our human capital, which we pour, I mean, no law firm loses the reality that you're a big part of your budget is your human capital, salaries for employees and staff and lawyers. And we've got to be managing that against what is going to be token capital. So,
yep. And just realizing that it's unbelievable in terms of the trajectory of where things are going to go. Like when we talked about Claude, months ago, we were nowhere near where we are now with the most recent announcements and things. And it's not only balancing the capital component, but also just making sure that we're putting our resources in the right direction, because it could be very expensive. They're constantly changing and they're getting better. And if you're getting locked into something that, is not going to meet your needs anymore, then that would be unfortunate, just because we're jumping on a bandwagon and not really having thought it through all the way to the end.
Absolutely. Okay. The other thing we like to keep up top of mind are resources. And one, as I say, I've been listening to a lot of Galloway. We always listen to our core AI and the Law podcast. Another one that Simon Sinek is obviously an incredible leader. Tim Ferriss has had some great recent podcasts with experts in AI. But Simon Sinek's recent podcast was one called "The AI Skills That Nobody is Teaching and Everybody Needs" with Ethan Mollick, and it was a really great podcast, and I highly recommend it if you've got time to listen to it. It's a recent Simon Sinek one, and worth doing. But what we wanted to continue to do is talk a little bit more about a resource that we are deep diving into in our change management efforts with AI, and maybe we can continue our discussion with that.
And so in our last podcast, we were talking about Jeff Wood's book, The AI-Driven Leader. And we sort of set up the fact that we are definitely enjoying this deep dive into his work and drawing so much from it that we'd like to share with you, because the whole thinking with it really is that we are not using AI in its most simplistic form as we did when it first came out, doing the spell check or rewrite my email and what have you. We're actually trying to train AI in order to become a strategic thought partner with us in our practices. And I think that is where we're going to see the greatest reward for all of our investments, for all of the sweat capital that we put into learning how to use the basics. And it sort of comes back to, Doug Higgins, our friend's comment at the very outset when we started adopting AI, and about the fact that we're on this moving train. It's a speed train, it's a bullet train. And if we don't start at the beginning and keep up, we're going to be left behind. And that's what we're seeing now, I think, from what I'm seeing anyways, in terms of the strategic thought, leadership, partnership kind of approach to using AI in our practices. I think it's going to be revolutionary.
Yeah, this strategic thinking and his idea of AI as being a strategic thought partner is pervasive in a lot of the podcasts that I'm listening to and some of the resources. I remember he defines it as the process of defining your strategy, then aligning your actions to achieve your most ambitious goals. And the critical skill and the backbone of effective leadership is the difference between becoming sort of a visionary leader as opposed to just a manager. And I think we as lawyers have fallen into the mere manager, mentor sort of role, and those days are gone.
Yep.
We're now in innovation.
And the reality is that in order to adopt this kind of thinking, we as lawyers are going to have to make two main shifts, according to Jeff Wood. One, of course, is the belief shift that AI is not a threat to us. It's not going to replace lawyers. It's not going to limit the number of lawyers that are out there. It is still always going to require human judgment. And it's enhancing that human judgment rather than actually removing it. And the real value, of course, is going to lie in the fact that we can do our strategic thinking, our creative strategic thinking, just faster and better. And I think that's one of the main shifts that we have to adopt as lawyers in moving forward with adopting AI in a more sophisticated fashion. And then, of course, there was the behavior shift that we talked about at the very end of our last podcast, where, we were talking about the fact that at our firm, we've implemented this little sticker policy on our laptops that says, how can AI help me solve this problem? How can AI help me do this better? As opposed to, how can I do this better? How can I help myself do it better? And I think, recognizing the power that can come with just that change in mindset is very, very important.
So true. This reframing is all part of the realignment and the change management that we continue to struggle with and encouraging our lawyers and lawyers generally to adopt the AI tools. All right. So one of the things that Scott also talks about is this idea of 3 strategic problems that can solve AI immediately. That AI can solve immediately. So this idea, part of the change management, unfortunately, in some ways, a bit frustrating for the leadership in AI and the law, is that you are in a constant sales mode, and you're constantly trying to remind the lawyers and your staff why it is important. And I really like the way Scott gave us 3 sort of immediate illustrations where the strategic problems that AI can resolve are really great sales points in terms of engaging with.
Yeah. And I know certainly in our practice area, there is a lot of data. There are a lot of records. There are a lot of pieces of information. And one of the first things that Jeff talks about is turning data into decisions. So we as leaders can be overwhelmed with the amount of information that's out there and trying to collate it and put it into a usable fashion, and recognizing that because we're human, we have our own personal biases about how we collate that information, how we process that information, how we deal with it. And so being able to learn how to use AI in order to test those kinds of assumptions, those biases, and to collect that data in a more usable fashion, I think is one of the easy starting points for what AI can do for us.
And he's great because he brings in the real life example of Blockbuster. And we always love to pile on Blockbuster because it's one of those classic for our generation. We were there, we saw it, we all rented videos from Blockbuster. And then now to talk about renting a video and going to a video store and all of that sort of stuff it's like talking about the Model T Ford, and he uses that, but I like it's a good illustration in the sense that what AI allows us to do is to really tease out our blind spots in a way that is efficient and maybe not all that intuitive, because at the end of the day, it's drawing on a lot of knowledge, and as smart as we're, as strong as we think we are, drawing out on that knowledge is so important. So it allows us to massive data analysis to occur. So, you get for our case, a use case that we just recently involved with is a very complex set of facts over a period of 5 years of a narrative that the client was great, like really comprehensively gave us a 7-page single space analysis of what had gone on. And that's really hard to sort of digest as a lawyer, because Sometimes it's not in the right order, and sometimes it's more information you need in some parts of it. And that's just an easy illustration of using data, analyzing it quickly, turning it around. And we use it a lot in our intake because it allows us to be on top of the file even faster in situations where we get that. But of course, data analysis is something that's pervasive in all aspects of our practice.
But certainly on the intake side, it's so important because, we are in the business of sales. If we don't get retained, most often we don't get paid. And so we've got clients who are expecting us to be more efficient with our time, be a lot more productive during our initial consultations. And then perhaps, if we're not ultimately retained, it's going to be a collection issue. And being able to harness the power of AI, get those summaries, get that understanding of the file quicker and deeper than we ever could before, I think it's going to add so much to our efficiencies and ultimately, hopefully, to our customer service or client service.
So the second component is, he talks about doing more with less, and that AI enables leaders in the law firm and their teams to dramatically increase output without increasing resources. And that's automating routine work, that's streamlining workflows, freeing up time for higher value priorities, all things that I know our firm is working hard at creating agentic tools. So tools that are agent-specific tools that can help us work through workflows. And an easy illustration, one we're working on right now is just trying to, for our marketing, trying to make the workflow smoother and trying to eliminate some steps along the way where a person has to be involved, where the tool can help us with. That's just an easy illustration. So automating routine work, streamlining, that's a big part of doing more with less.
And we're actually seeing the results, I think, more than I even expected. There's some research done by the Boston Consulting Group with Harvard that Jeff Wood talks about, and he had found that the professionals who are using AI have a 40% increase in the quality of their work. That's increasing the quality. It's also letting them complete their tasks 25% faster. And as a result, they can do much more work as a consequence of that. And so those three factors, the quality, the speed, and the ability to do more in less, I think now we're seeing methods where there is data that supports it. We always thought it made sense. That's usually how we'd expect it to work, but now we've got the proof. And I think that's hard to ignore.
I couldn't agree more. And the third component before we wind up today is aligning short-term efforts with long-term vision. So what was Scott getting at with that, Suzana?
Well, organizations typically will reward short-term results. As lawyers, we're leaders in law firms, we're going to reward those lawyers who are working really, really hard for a particular purpose and getting something done, and perhaps at the expense of a long-term strategy. And that's what I think he's trying to say, is that we've got to keep our eye on the ball. Sure, the immediate reward looks like that's what you're looking for, but you want to make sure that you can sort of extend that out into the future so it is something that is sustainable.
And then, again, he piles on Blockbuster, which is a great point, where Blockbuster's decision, they reinstated late fees. They didn't go to streaming. They made strategic decisions that weren't just that led to their failure, and that was a short-term win for them without a long-term result. So realigning that is such a great idea, and AI leaders then can sort of run scenario planning, which is it's more difficult than you think. We can think every we know every chess move in a lawsuit, but I'm more and more using the tools to run scenarios and say, okay, look, in this situation, if I do this and this, where do you think this is going to land? And benchmark it against some case law as well, and tie in both your strategic thinking with the legal analysis and coming up with innovative and also, quite frankly, ideas that I may not have thought of if I hadn't come up with this sort of practice.
I think that logic tree is something that we as lawyers always did. We would, if A, then B, if B, then C. But now with the benefit of a strategic thought partner, we can go down rabbit holes that we never would have considered. They might lead into other suggestions, and they might also just help us understand the weaknesses and what we would have traditionally have done if we hadn't actually tested and really push the limits to what AI can do.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know we've sort of talked about sort of the implementation of this strategic thinking. In our next podcast, I think what's a good idea is to talk about where Scott got into this idea of why we as lawyers can't afford to wait any longer. So we'll do a deep dive into that next time we get together. And we'll certainly continue to keep our ear to the ground to recent trends and developments. We're going to be trying to give sort of regular reports on our experience with Claude, the legal, because what we're doing now is that we are doing a sort of beta testing them internally, and we're going to know more and more over the next week. So we're going to continue to update our listeners on how that's going, and also to illustrate why it might be the right tool for you to be considering, but also balancing it against, as you say, sometimes you get caught on the shiny object, and you're like a cat, you're following it along. So those are some of the things that we're going to be continuing to look at, and also just talking about how we're going to manage what is going to be an endless battle, and that is change management.
Absolutely. And to those of you who have joined us today, thank you very much. And do feel free to reach out and share your experiences, your stories, your thoughts, so that we can keep this dialogue going and learn from one another to the extent possible.
And I forgot to do this at the beginning, but I'll do it at the end and do it at the beginning the next time, is please, if you could, press the follow button on whatever tool, whatever resource you're reading, listening to our podcast from, because it really helps our SEO. So press follow, and we'll keep sending great content out. So thanks so much, Suzana. Great to see you.
Thank you very
And
much.
we look forward to it next time we get together.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
You have been listening to A Better Place to Be, AI and the Law, with hosts Ian Hull and Suzana Popovic-Montag from Hull and Hull LLP, brought to you by counsel.ai. If you have any questions or comments, please email our office at info@cnsl.ai. Thank you.